Another day, another story. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Plant Power. Today we are going to learn about how plants make more plants. That's right, we are talking about plant reproduction. Plants are amazing living things that can grow almost anywhere on Earth. They provide us with oxygen, food, medicine, and many other things. But how do they reproduce? How do they make new plants? Well, there are different ways that plants can do this, depending on what kind of plant they are. Some plants can reproduce asexually, which means they can make new plants without using any seeds or flowers. They can do this by using parts of their own body, such as stems, roots, or leaves. For example, some plants can grow new plants from their roots, like potatoes or strawberries. Other plants can grow new plants from their stems, like cacti or bamboo. And some plants can grow new plants from their leaves, like African violets or begonias. But most plants reproduce sexually, which means they use seeds and flowers to make new plants. These plants are called flowering plants, and they have a very interesting life cycle. Let's take a closer look at how flowering plants reproduce. The first stage of reproduction in flowering plants is called pollination. This is when the pollen produced on the anther of a flower moves to the stigma of another flower. Pollen is a tiny yellow powder that contains the male sex cells of the plant. The stigma is a sticky part of the flower that collects the pollen. The anther and the stigma are parts of the stamen and the pistil, which are the male and female parts of the flower. But how does the pollen move from one flower to another? Well, there are two main ways that flowers are pollinated, by insects and by the wind. Some flowers have brightly colored petals and sweet-smelling nectar to attract insects like bees, butterflies, or moths. These insects visit the flowers to drink the nectar and get covered with pollen. Then they fly to another flower and transfer some of the pollen to its stigma. This is called insect pollination. Other flowers have dull-colored petals and no scent, because they don't need to attract insects. Instead, they produce a lot of fine pollen that can be carried by the wind. These flowers have their anthers outside the flower and their stigmas feathery and exposed. When the wind blows, it picks up some of the pollen and drops it on another flower's stigma. This is called wind pollination. The second stage of reproduction in flowering plants is called fertilization. This is when the pollen grain that lands on the stigma grows a tube down to the ovary of the flower. The ovary is a part of the pistil that contains ovules, which are the female sex cells of the plant. The pollen tube carries one male sex cell down to one ovule and joins with it. This is called fertilization. When an ovule is fertilized by a pollen grain, it becomes a seed. The seed contains an embryo, which is a baby plant, and a food store that will help it grow later. The ovary wall then becomes a fruit or a pod that protects the seed. The third stage of reproduction in flowering plants is called dispersal. This is when the seeds are scattered away from the parent plant by animals or by the wind. Some fruits have juicy flesh that attracts animals like birds or squirrels. These animals eat the fruits and spit out or poop out the seeds somewhere else. This is called animal dispersal. Other fruits have wings or parachutes that help them fly in the wind. These fruits can be carried far away from the parent plant by air currents. This is called wind dispersal. The fourth stage of reproduction in flowering plants is called germination. This is when the seed starts to grow into a new plant when it finds suitable conditions. The seed needs water, warmth, and oxygen to germinate. When these conditions are met, the seed coat breaks open and a root grows out of it. The root anchors the seed in the soil and absorbs water and minerals from it. Then a shoot grows out of the seed and pushes through the soil towards the light. The shoot has leaves that make food for the plant by photosynthesis. And that's how flowering plants reproduce. Isn't it amazing how a tiny seed can grow into a beautiful flower? I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new about plant reproduction. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more plant power videos.